I hope you've been enjoying the food. I really do think it's quite good out there. So thank you to all the catering staff as well who can't hear me right now. We are going to continue with Kenneth Liang from ESRIC, and it's going to be a continuation of economy and future governance. And then we'll go directly into a panel discussion also led and chaired by Kenneth on unlocking the space economy. Also, as many of you know, there are wonderful parallel sessions going on in the Sigma room, which is a beautiful room. I am very glad you're here, however, and again, I'm going to do the very boring encouragement to sit close to the front because, as every speaker has said, we really can't see beyond row 2, and particularly not either side. So if you could sit in rows 1 and 2, if you don't mind, that would be highly encouraged by me. And also particularly because we have lost one of the speakers. Unfortunately, Martin Lemberg-Pertison from SDU can't come. So we have extra time for questions, and particularly for the panel discussion, there might be time for questions as well. So I'm sure Kenneth will be very appreciative, and the speakers will be very appreciative. Thank you to our fabulous photographer. She's in the shadows there, but her photos are truly amazing. Thank you very, very much indeed. And without further ado, Kenneth, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So we have a very interesting 2 talks on economic things happening in the space resources world, and then we'll go into a panel discussion that is also revolving around this. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Darshan Vigneswaran, who is from the University of Amsterdam and is representing Space Interface.
Thanks, Kenneth, for the introduction. Here we are. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to speak to you from the position of both a political scientist and someone who is interested in space communication. And today, we spoke in the first session a lot about astronauts, like in the very opening session, but we haven't heard a lot more about that, and I'm going to bring them back into the fold as some of potentially the principal utilizers of resources in a new outer space economy. So the question that I'm really interested in answering is this one. What kind of resource economy is emerging in space? Many of us would like to think that we are seeing the emergence of a market economy, right? Something that's very familiar in many modern liberal democracies, and that operates according to laws of supply and demand, and where companies seek to create efficiencies in order to attract the largest client base or market share. But there are other forms of economies out there, right? We've seen it through human history, and particularly in the former Soviet Union, the operation of command economies, where instead of the market determining principles of value, the state determines what is valuable, how much things are worth, what should be considered a vital resource. And maybe in thinking about the sorts of economy that we're working in, this concept may be more useful for the sort of economy that we're seeing emerging, or particularly the sort of economy that we see operating right now. And I'd also like to ask you to think about, are there any other potential variations or types of economy we can imagine? Because at present, I would say that many of you are, for example, in the mining industry, right? And you would have operated in many different national contexts. And you would understand that if you were to go to a place like, for example, if you were doing oil extraction in the UAE, or if you were mining for diamonds in the Congo, or if you were looking for rare earth minerals in China, you're operating within very different sorts of economies with very different types of governance structures, culturally embedded norms, and your business strategy is going to have to change and operate according to very different understandings of how business works in those contexts. And so what I'm interested in is why are we assuming necessarily that the sort of economy we're going to get in outer space is going to look more like a market economy or a command economy, and why might it not look like something completely different or unexpected? So in order to do that, I'm going to get you to think a little bit about how we understand variation in types of economies in the field of political science. And we largely use this concept of a mode of production, right? And I'm not going to spend too much time lecturing you on this, but it consists of a couple of things, right? On the one hand, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, right? The forces of production are the factors that make production possible: raw materials, technology, infrastructure, and labor. But I want you to think about the other side of what a mode of production is, and that is the relations of production, right? The social stuff that goes around the production of goods and the production, most importantly, of value, assigning value to goods and products. And so this relates to questions of ownership, distribution of work, and value. Now, my question in this research that I'm conducting, and I know this is going to be somewhat adjacent to many of the questions that you're asking, is what relations of production have defined astronaut resource practices? Now, we know that astronauts are going to be some of the major consumers of resources in lunar environments. But what interests me is that I don't want to really necessarily look towards the future. I'm an empiricist. I need data. I need things that have happened in order to study politics and economics. I'm interested in what is happening now in relationship to resources, what resources we've seen in the past, and how astronauts have related to things like value. So in order to do this, I've done a couple of research methods. I'm happy to go into more detail in the nerdy side of this, but really I'm going to spend more time on results. I've conducted observational research at the Columbus Control Center in Munich, listening to space-to-ground communications. And I've done textual, the majority of the work that I'm going to present to you today is textual analysis of astronaut memoirs and biographies. We built the largest database of astronaut memoirs that spans 138 memoirs, and utilize this to think about the sorts of ways in which astronauts relate to resources. So I'm going to start by working inductively through this data and give you a few examples which illustrate the different types of modes of production that I've seen and observed in my data. Now, to start off with, this is largely, astronaut life is governed by what is called a command economy, right? Space agencies determine what goes up, what comes down, and how value is attributed. But in the midst of that, we find examples of a range of different other types of economic practices that I think are worth looking at and thinking about how they're culturally embedded in astronaut lives. Okay, so first finding is that culture defines how crews relate to resources. Here's an image of two astronauts, Gus Grissom and John Young. This is on the Gemini mission, in which became famous for something that is not pictured in this image, but it's hiding inside John Young's suit. Does anyone know what that is? It's a pastrami sandwich, right? John Young brings on board a corned beef sandwich, and during the flight, this is a joke that he's playing on his fellow astronaut, he takes it out and says, hey, look, I've got this sandwich, would you like to eat it? And it starts breaking up in flight, as you see within this text, and thereby jeopardizing the security and safety of the mission. When the astronauts come back down to Earth, they are reprimanded for this. It ends up going to a NASA inquiry in which the public officials are asking, how in the earth did this happen? Now, whilst this is sort of a freakish incident and a sort of a cavalier utilization of resources, when you look a little bit further into astronaut life, it's actually absolutely par for the course. Astronauts had this, and still have, this culture of pranking one another, consistently utilizing jokes of this nature while on mission, and it's actually embedded deeply, particularly in this early era of exploration, in the precise skills that they were being asked to demonstrate whilst on board mission. If you will remember, many of these astronauts were not simply pilots, but test pilots who were primarily valued and valorized for their ability to go beyond the limits of whatever their machinery or their technology that they were in charge of and asked to utilize. So what we're seeing here in this sort of bizarre smuggling incident is not a reflection simply of a bizarre moment of pranking, but something deeply ingrained in astronaut culture and how they've utilized or viewed the utilization of resources. Moving on to something that's more of an actual type of economy, we move to a second incident, which is a more serious issue of smuggling on board an Apollo mission in this case. Does anyone know about the postal covers incident? This is an incident where a group of astronauts were charged with taking these postal covers on board their missions in order to increase their value and to return to Earth in order to sell them onwards into various markets. In this case, one that was being developed by a German trader who was selling these postal covers in order to earn money, which the astronauts then used to accommodate the fact that they were unable to get insurance for many of these early flights and early missions, and to build trust funds for their children. This is a really interesting incident because it realizes and it evidences the existence of a different type of economic exchange and production that was going on board these Apollo missions. Again, we're not talking about large numbers of abiotic resources, but valuable resources that value is produced primarily by the fact that they've gone on a particular mission. And what's interesting in this set of relationships is that we see that astronauts have built sort of this clientelist relationship where the chief astronaut, Deke Slayton, actually condoned these practices because they were a way of astronauts providing for the fact that they were unable to obtain insurance for themselves and their families. And these personal relationships between astronauts and the astronaut office allowed for the continuation of this economic practice deep into the Apollo era. It's not just these types of economies or relations of production that we begin to see in astronaut missions. We also see examples moving forward here into the case of the International Space Station, where Scott Kelly talks about a very peculiar type of bartering that begins to emerge on board the International Space Station. He's not drinking pee in this particular image, he's drinking coffee, I think, on board his year-long mission to the International Space Station. But what he's referring to in this quote is the fact that whilst resources between the two missions, both the Russian and the United States mission, were viewed as quite separate, as non-interchangeable, we see the emergence of a form of bartering between the resources that were developed on board, in this case in the sort of semi-disgusting form of the bartering of urine in order for water to be developed. But we see many different ways in which there is these sorts of informal exchanges of value for the purpose of maintaining and persisting with life on board. One final one, and I think if I'm going to take a couple more minutes than the time limit, then that'll be great. In addition to bartering, we also see instances of what I think many of the scientists at this conference will be far more familiar with, and it's this culture that is called, by Marshall Sahlins, diffuse reciprocity. In this case, Richard Garriott had paid for his seat aboard a Russian mission to the International Space Station and was a cosmonaut on board. And prior to this mission, the United States, which was not at this time, and NASA, which was not au fait with the selling of seats on board these missions, actually asked Richard, okay, you've paid for your ticket to the Russian side of the space station, but if you're going to come on board the US side of the space station, you're going to have to pay for every experiment, you're going to have to pay for every time you utilize our resources, because this is the value of what it is to be an astronaut on one of our missions. Richard refused to pay these amounts, and by the time he got on board his Soyuz capsule to get to the International Space Station, he was told he would not be allowed to enter the US side of the International Space Station because he had not paid the appropriate fee. But he was greeted by astronaut Mike Fink, the commander on board the mission at the time, with this quote, who welcomed him on board and acknowledged that, hey, we're all scientists here. We share whatever resources we have, and we allow anyone who comes on board to utilize those without paying these ridiculous fees for these resources. So what are the upshots from this talk? And I'm going to run through them quickly and I'm going to hand it back to you. Okay, so what can we learn from astronauts' resource practices? Well, first of all, when you add humans to any form of resource economy, things get messy. Culture enters the picture, and those things are embedded in sets of norms and practices that we can't necessarily predict And I'm sorry to all the lawyers in the room that we cannot design, right? We cannot design an economy or predict how it's going to take place, particularly when there are humans involved. Secondly, a market economy is one possible future for space resources, but not necessarily the only or inevitable one. There are many possible futures. And if we think about the resource economies that we have on Earth, there's no reason to expect that the model that we see practiced in contemporary liberal democracies is the one that we're going to see in the future in space. And finally, I believe that the rudiments of a more sustainable and collective space resource economies, but also more corrupt or unethical forms, may be found in astronaut behavior. And the study of these practices is super important to trying to think about how resources will eventually be utilized, traded, understood, valued in a future resource economy. I have thoughts about how this applies to business practice. If you could give me 30 more seconds, I can apply that. Yeah. Kenneth is saying yes. So what is this the upshot for all of you? Well, I want you each to ask yourself the question, what sort of economy am I actually operating in right now? Is it a market economy when ESA is determining or NASA is determining exactly who gets contract, how value is assigned? What sort of economy am I operating in, and how does this impact upon my business practices? Am I really in a clientelist economy where my relationships with partners matter much more than my ability to achieve economic efficiencies or those sorts of things? We help with the communication side of those dilemmas, and I'd be happy to talk more about those after this presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Darshan. That was very interesting. I really like the illicit economy information here. So let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Does anyone have a question? Yes, right here, please.
Thank you very much for the very, very nice talk. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. The economy here on Earth is individualistic. It promotes ego through consumerism, and where on space, it seems to me that by necessity it has to be more communal among astronauts. So that would be a factor determining what would be the economy on space.
Absolutely. I don't think that we necessarily see a market economy for economists is something that naturally occurs through the existence of, it's a fundamental assumption of their analytical framework, right? And for political scientists, we question that assumption. And particularly on a place like the International Space Station, there's no market economy. There's a sharing economy. There's a culture defined by diffuse reciprocity because the goals are defined by science. And I think we could also, like a lot of the analyses that we have of, say, a potential lunar economy are based on this assumption of conflict, of competition, particularly between nations and an understanding of geopolitics that is necessarily realist in nature. But I don't think that those assumptions necessarily have to apply, particularly when all of these missions are led by scientists, right? I think that questions those fundamental assumptions. Yeah, I agree.
Very nice. I think we have Delane over here.
Hi, Delane Mayer. Super interesting presentation. Thank you. A two-part question. I'm curious how kind of Chinese taikonaut culture has developed since it's kind of evolving convergently from International Space Station culture. And then the second part of that is if we kind of future cast astronaut culture out, assuming continued divergence between these two cultural groups, what do you think that looks like in terms of commingling or opportunities for coordination, participation together in the future?
Yeah, the Chinese memoir database is pretty limited, right? And also even our ability to extract a lot from So some of the memoirs that are in the database are cosmonaut memoirs, and you can extract a certain amount from that, but many of those were heavily edited and designed for a particular form of public consumption and communication. So I have limited things to offer you, but we're happy to chat more about what those divergences might be and how we could potentially study them. I'd like to get that at that empirically.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we have one more question, and that'll be it for this session.
This is Sujit from Public Access. Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah. This is Sujit from Public Access. I just wanted to give a comment. I was at a conference a few weeks ago. It was Living and Working in Space, hosted by the National Academy of Engineering at Ohio State University. And there were a few astronauts who were presenting. And there was a specific case which was mentioned, which probably, I don't know whether it's in the annals of history at this point, but there were two astronauts which went aboard a mission from the US. And something happened mid-journey, and they decided not to talk to one another. And so for every instance, they had to go back to Houston to communicate the message from one astronaut to the other. Let's say a maneuver had to be done in space, etc. So the ideation that there is a harmonious relationship between the astronauts, it is wishful thinking, because at the end, everybody is human, and they had to abort the mission and come back. That was the outcome.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the case, but I'm familiar with many similar ones, right? And I'm not trying to give you the impression here that we're looking at a harmonious possibility. I'm just suggesting that there are multiple alternate possibilities, right? And a market economy is not the only one, right? And so we should be preparing on the assumption that there could be many different sorts of economic frameworks that define behavior on any sort of alternate surface. And I think, like, even if you look around sort of this venue and the sorts of relationships that are being built amongst the very many different economic actors that we have here, we have different economies developing in this room, right? And that's the sort of reality that I want people to pay attention to in how they position their business and how they communicate what their value is. And that's what I'm interested in working on.
All right, Darshan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So if I could have Candice raise your hand. All right, well, Candice, if you're here, please come over to this side. And then we'll have next, George Lordos. Come up to the stage, please. George is from MIT, and he's talking about resources and everything that we love. So thank you, George.
Thank you. Okay, great. So, Darshan posed the question of will we have a command economy or a market economy? So I will offer a proposition in the next 10 minutes that at least in the early days, it's going to have to be a bit of both. So sit back, relax, and let's go through this together. I am a research scientist at MIT, and I am the founder of the Space Resources Workshop at MIT, where we work together with many students on interesting space resources architectural questions. I'm also the vice chair of the AIAA Space Resources Technical Committee and a member of the Lunar Surface Exploration and Development Task Force. And my co-authors are also members of the task force. I'd like to acknowledge them, Dallas, Shirley, I can't see from there, Christy, Ryan, Bob, Clive, who is here today, I think, and Bill. So we need a development strategy. That's the thesis of this presentation. And this is different from having technology roadmaps or trade studies between technologies. Trade studies or technology roadmaps answer the question of what, but a strategy answers very different questions, why and how. So, okay, so why do we need a lunar commodities development strategy? So all of us here should be familiar with the answers. Moon and Mars would fail with the same arithmetic. $1 million, give or take, per kilogram for Earth-supplied operations. That's economically fragile and politically cancelable. And so a moon-developed ISRU capability is a precondition for a permanent presence on the lunar surface and for future missions to Mars. So what is the biggest roadblock to a lunar industrial scale ISRU capability that our strategy should overcome? Well, it's not a missing technology. There isn't something that we have to invent that we haven't yet invented. It's a missing decision. This decision is locked inside a classic collective action problem. There is a vicious circle where, because there is no demand, there's no supply. And because there are no firms offering supply, there are no customers committing to have demand in the future. So we should be adding a question to our thoughts. In addition to all the wonderful presentations we've been seeing about what we should invent, we should also be asking, what should we commit to? So what is the first decision that we should make? We should be widening the lens from a single commodity utilization pilot concept, so pilot plants that aim to extract one commodity, to infrastructure development. So instead of asking how should we extract oxygen from regolith, we should be asking what infrastructure must coexist to produce, store, transfer, sell, and yes, why not even recycle oxygen? And how will all that infrastructure be integrated into habitats, into landers, into power grids? So how might this first decision for a wider lens actually influence what we will end up building? So if we step back and look at all lunar commodities, we could classify them as natural and artificial, or material versus non-material. And this non-material and artificial categories is really where we have the most gaps in the literature if we go back to the whole history of ISRU studies. But it's also where many excellent presentations here at ESRIC, at the Space Resources Week, have been contributing outstanding original work. So imagine putting waste heat and surplus power and scavenged metals on the same footing as in situ produced resources, how that would give completely new opportunities to lunar architects to design lunar infrastructure as a true system of systems. So whichever commodity stream an architect is focusing on, they would have to think in terms of complete value chains. So from individual technologies to value chains. And the key point here is the recognition that we have to be maturing every element of a value chain at the same time. We should be architecting the entire value chain together, not piecemeal. Because that is the way that we can capture all the benefits from the different waste streams and different kinds of commodities. So there is this interdependence among all the elements of the value chain. So up to this point, we have seen why we need a strategy and what the scope of lunar infrastructure might look like at this wider lens with the different 4 categories of commodity streams and the value chains that we have to be thinking about. But we haven't said how this collective action problem, this roadblock of no demand, no supply, will be actually overcome. So in the 19th century, the United States faced a comparable collective action problem. There was a great need to build railroads from east to west, but this was not happening fast enough. And so the Pacific Railroads Act of 1862 addressed this collective action problem, which had a comparable scale to what we are facing today, by federal market making. So they offered land grants, bond guarantees, and the baseline demand was guaranteed with postal and military contracts. And so the government did not have to lay any railroad track. All this was done by private companies. But the government did create the markets. And so the analogy is not predictive, and it does kind of address Darshan's point, I think, right? That you do need the government to create the foundations for markets to emerge and grow. But it definitely is an instructive analogy. It shows us a shape of an intervention that has worked in the past. So what is the lunar equivalent of the Pacific Railroads Act? So this would be the binding purchase contracts, and we've seen news while we were here with Interloon getting a contract that kind of looks like this, not exactly. But these contracts should be pre-purchase agreements for specific quantities of lunar commodities at specific delivery dates. These contracts are bankable, right? You can, with that contract, the company can raise capital from investors, from banks, and then that breaks the deadlock. So this is the first of our 5 recommendations in our upcoming journal paper, which describes all of this. This is the first of our 5 recommendations, and it is the one that does most of the work to dissolve the deadlock. So once capital flows, the fastest route from a pilot plant to industry is what we call the test as we build development strategy. So the specific intervention here would be to leverage the fact that space agencies and governments will be giving out contracts to promote the use of test as we build. And so the iterative surface deployment means that each pilot generates the operational data that designs the next pilot. And so commercial operations function as an accelerator of technology maturation rather than sources of risk. We must not forget about the institutional dimension, because it's not all engineering and economics. The legal status of resource extraction is one dimension. Coordination of safety zones through the Artemis Accords. The contest between great powers of who will establish the first moon base. And then the questions of interoperability of equipment across vendors and countries. All of these, what do they have in common? They're decisional, they're not technical. So that's the key point of our entire perspective here, that the missing decision is not an invention that we haven't found yet. It's decisional. We need to make decisions. And so this covers the last 3 recommendations that we have, which are that we should harmonize safety zones, fund coordinated prospecting, and promote open interfaces so that the development on the moon takes place in a regular and organized way. So we have these 5 recommendations, and taken together, they will determine whether early lunar activities accumulate into enduring, scalable infrastructure that will compound across decades, or whether they will lock us in to short duration outcomes that exhaust the political capital and leave nothing behind. And so I will close with a question for the room. which of these or how many of these activities or decisions does Europe want to lead? Will Europe play its part in this multipolar world that we now live in to move us forward towards a lunar commodities development strategy to the moon and to Mars? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, George. Let's go open up the room to some questions. We have a couple minutes before the next session. Please, Emma.
Thank you, George. Great talk. I would say out of those 5, they're already happening. What would you say to that?
So they are already happening. So why don't we have the investment at the scale that is happening in other markets? Compare the investment in artificial intelligence with the investment on ISRU in the private markets. They are happening. We need more of it, and we need consistency and coordination, and we need intentionality. There is a lot of promising things with the new ignition announcements that the new NASA administrator has made, but there are many stakeholders, especially in the United States, and it's a similar picture here in Europe with multiple stakeholders, governments and the space agency. And we just need more intentionality, more forcefulness, more speed, like any business.
Okay, a little bit of a follow-up here. So you say you want more speed, more intentionality, more. Do you have any information on kind of where there's like a break point where if we have enough speed, enough intentionality, enough like financial backing, this is what we need to get to the next level?
I don't think anyone does, because these are non-linear compounding interactions, and things can take off or stall and collapse with the well-known butterfly effect. Butterfly flaps its wings in Beijing, and there was a question from.
I think Clive Neal is next.
Are you giving it to me, or are you going to order it? I'm going to go. I'm going to go. And just to follow on from what Emma said, they're not all happening. There is no funded, coordinated prospecting going on. So they're not all happening. And when you see one of them not happening, it slows down the others. So, and as George said, they need to happen because they feed off each other.
Very good. We have time for one more question. Let's do Sujit.
George, one of the things which you said, I kind of would like to counter that. With regards to in ISRO, for example, the problem we see is we don't have tangible material gains and benefits at this time. I'll give you a simple example. Wegovy. It was a drug which was generated, FDA approved it. As soon as the drug was approved and it hit the market and people can see beneficial results, the sales skyrocketed. Even people who did not want it, they went and got it. That is the point I'm trying to make. Once we see tangible results where we are able to get the resources from the moon, from the asteroids, wherever, down to Earth, and it makes material benefit and actual impact to the economic engine of the process, then we will start seeing a lot of this unlocking which you are saying.
So I'll actually push back. Are you suggesting that we should replace these 5 decisions with the one idea that you just mentioned?
No, I'm not saying replace anything. I'm saying that maybe we should consider other aspects which might be influencing some of these decision-making processes, where the economic, so the financial markets are very geared towards seeing an economic impact. And that is what is driving a lot of this circularity.
Right.
And I think because the markets are not seeing any financial impact from space resources at this point, this is why there is some stagnation which affects this entire cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the point I was trying to make.
Okay, so I think the answer to your question is the implementation of all 5 of these, right? Because once you have, for example, the binding contracts, then investors see the promise of the return and they will invest. And that starts to break the supply and demand deadlock that we have right now. And then once you start doing things on the moon, then you start learning. Point number 2, test as we build. And as you start learning, you improve the satisfaction of everyone that you mentioned before. And that moves everything forward. And as things grow, we need to harmonize safety zones so that we don't have incidents which set us back. And then, we need to, before we do any of this, we need to know where the resources are so that we can de-risk and reduce the cost to private companies. So we really do need all 5, and that's the message that I want you all to go away with, that which of these will Europe take on and lead, right? Because we need multilateral leadership here. It shouldn't be one country leading everything. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, George. One more round of applause. Okay, so we're going to continue with more strategic thought surrounding the space economy. We're going to dive right into a panel. I'm going to get comfy here. Okay, and I'd like to introduce my 3 panelists. First off, Bernhard Hufenbach from ESA. There he is. So Bernhard works on commercialization, and he'll talk a little bit more at the introduction part. My next panelist will be Candice Manchon from the European Court of Justice. Candice has been working a lot on the EU Space Act and has a lot of things to say surrounding it. Welcome, Candice. And finally, I have Laura Ann Edwards, who is a founder of Geospace Resources and has a lot of experience from Silicon Valley and a lot of startups and financing with minerals. Okay, so to kind of set the stage, all of these nation states, China, the US, EU, Japan, India, South Korea, Australia, everyone's kind of looking at space and seeing the next space economy happening and growing in the next decade or so. So there's a lot of competition at the nation state, and everyone's kind of coming at it at a different perspective from the legal, the commercialization, and the technology development aspects. So today we have these 3 distinct voices, a legal expert, a financing and startup expert, and a commercialization expert. I'd like you guys all to introduce yourselves a little bit, and just so we know the background of where you're coming from in this discussion. So Bernhard, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I'm Bernhard Hufenbach. I work now already since 36 years for the European Space Agency, so I'm really an ESA guy. I know a lot about the ESA culture. And since about 10 years, I work on commercialization and innovation management.
Excellent, thank you. And then Candice?
For me, I'm a lawyer, specialized in European law. I start with a law firm, then I jump at the European Court of Justice, where I manage with a lot of legal issues.
Excellent, thank you, Candice. And then Laura?
I have such a weird background. I lecture at the University of Oxford on the space economy and space governance. My skill set background, though, that I think is relevant is tech integration. So I did, for many years, tech integration in the film business and the cable industry, and that has ported over really interestingly to looking at things as systems.
Got it. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so in Silicon Valley, it looks like new space is kind of in vogue right now, right? We're seeing a lot of investment in StarCloud and a lot of these satellite companies, and everyone's closing large rounds in the hundreds of millions. So why not space resources? Why isn't it getting as much investment? What are you seeing as a Silicon Valley insider, and what are your perspectives here?
Well, some of the comments that were in the last presenter, or in reaction to the last presenter, I'd say there's a lot of investment in a very few categories, right? We're super saturated, first in small sat, and now in constellations, and in launch, and yet everybody else is kind of starving or holding on to that space agency contract. So I think there's a natural lag because there was public-private funding for those big humps where that isn't the same. There's not the same public funding for in situ either.
Okay, great, thank you. But we are seeing a lot of public funding kind of going into these frontier fields. We're seeing that kind of funding in defense, and we're seeing that funding in climate tech and a lot of other fields with hard tech problems. So I think the desire's there from the nation state level. We're going to talk a little bit more about the EU and what's happening within our markets. Candice, let's open with you and talk about the EU Space Act. I want to know all about it from a startup's perspective. It's a big piece of legislature, so I would love to learn more about how it's going to affect me as a startup founder.
Okay, so yeah, for now, it's just a proposal of a regulation from the Commission.
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry. It's better?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's just a proposal. So I would like to speak about three main points. The first one is the question of the European passport. It's the question of the authorization, because when a company wants to have some space activity in the European Union, or when a company wants to provide some space services in the European Union, they have to ask for an authorization in every member states. With the European passport, it would list the company to just have one authorization that would be valid and recognized in all the other member states. The second point is the European label. It's a voluntary certification that highlights the space activity that comply with the highest standard of European Union, that is resilience, safety, and sustainability. And the third point is about the foreign company, because when foreign companies, so basically company not based in the European Union, wants to have some space activity or provide some space services in the European Union, they have to comply also with the European standard. So that make EU space market with a fair and loyal competition.
Very nice. Okay, so the EU passport sounds really cool, and using the market weight of the EU is pretty impressive. Bernhard, from the ESA perspective, what is ESA doing to kind of adjust and react to the EU Space Act?
I'm not sure that we're directly reacting to it. In ESA, the topic of commercialization, and it's a lot also about commercialization, I think is a topic of growing importance since a couple of years already. I think certainly last 5 years we've seen a lot of evolution in this area. So I think clearly the Space Act is beneficial, but ESA looks at commercialization maybe a little bit from a different perspective. Clearly we have in ESA even a commercialization policy, which defines 3 roles for ESA. ESA can be an enabler of startups. We have this incubation program, acceleration programs. ESA can also enable ecosystem development, like what we see here during Space Resources Week. Then ESA can be a partner to help industry to develop infrastructure or put new service on the market, and ESA can be an anchor customer. So these 3 roles are clearly articulated. And in order then to actually accelerate commercialization, what we see in ESA today, and that a little bit opens the door, I think, for more commercialization, is a transition to different kind of procurement models. We go more and more, not only, we go a bit away from the classical mission-based or product-based procurement to service procurement, for example. Service procurements are a stepping stone towards more commercialization. It opens the door for that there are other customers in ESA maybe for these services. We also procure data now, for example, so not hardware, but data. So I would say the overall procurement scheme, and in the end, ESA is a procurement organization. I think our procurement organization is such today that with the Space Act, we can already leverage very nicely the emergence of this new regulation.
Excellent, thank you. And so speaking of services procurement, I know that the EU Space Act has some provisions surrounding in-space operations and servicing and all the sustainability that kind of surrounds satellites as they are today. So Candice, could you discuss a little bit more about the sustainability aspect?
For the sustainability aspect, when the EU Space Act will be enforced, if the proposal will be enforced, the first point is the maintenance of the satellite. That is to say, satellite must be allowed to be refueled, to be repaired, to be maintained in the orbit, in order to prevent from more and more orbital debris, especially to avoid the famous Kessel syndrome. Then the second point is the maneuverability of the satellite. The aim of this point is to prevent collision between satellites. So the companies, the small companies, also ask to prove that they have some system to prevent from collision between satellites. And the third point is the end of life of satellites. First, the company has to have some active system in order to remain the satellite. There is a delay. It's 5 years within the life operational end of satellite. And there is another obligation about the passivation. That is to say, all the remaining energy in satellite has to be remain from them before they are bring back to the Earth.
Okay, sounds expensive. From ex-entrepreneur's seat, you know, like it sounds like that really puts Europe as a disadvantage. I don't know, Bernhard, could you comment on that? Like, what is ESA's thought?
No, it's clear. Sustainability is a key element of the Space Act, and I think also European policy in general. Clearly, if we apply that to the lunar economy, it will have a major influence. Lunar orbit traffic management, waste management, environmental protection, preserving scientific sites, pristine scientific sites, how we use space resources. I think it will impact everything on how we contribute to the lunar economy. And I guess, of course, clearly for startups, it's maybe a cost burden to be regulation compliant. The question is more strategic, whether long term it adds a benefit. And I think if it's well done, if it's not just used as a burden, but as a branding, I think it could be quite interesting. Because I think there's clearly a misalignment on regulation between what we see in Europe and the United States. But interestingly, we have since about 15 years an international coordination committee where all the global space agencies come together to talk about strategy for space exploration. It's called the International Space Exploration Coordination Group. We developed strategies, roadmaps, and sustainability is a key feature. So when you talk to the programmatic implementation level, it's not that there is a misalignment, it's really at regulatory level. And in this context, I would be very hopeful if Europe sets a path towards sustainable exploration and prepares the companies to be compliant. That is a great competitive advantage in the long term.
I was going to say, I think it's also an awkward hiccup in LEO that needed to, they're fixing the fact that it went up unregulated. A circular economy in space is inevitable. It's required and inevitable, and it's going to take a while for LEO to have that, but the moon is going to start out that way. You're not going to be allowed to leave random rovers around the moon and much longer, right? Like just the peer pressure and the reality. So I actually think it's hugely beneficial for all of us for some of these best practices to be articulated. And I can certainly say as an American, it is great to have Europe lay out how they want things to work. Because whether I want to do business with European companies or in competition, understanding the rules is super helpful.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so speaking of all of these rules and all of these constraints on startups, I think we've talked enough about the stick, so let's talk a little bit more about the carrot. Back to Bernhard, what is ESA doing to kind of incentivize the bankability and the financeability of startups and space resources?
I think ESA works in three directions with the, let's call it the upstream, the service provider, the potential customers, and the investment community. So when it comes to working with potential future service provider, ESA makes, I think, service more bankable by firstly playing a key role in de-risking the technology, supporting technology demonstration and orbit demonstrations, which we heard earlier today is a key milestone for unlocking investment. On top, we act as anchor customer in many cases to enable to establish new service. So that clearly positions these companies far more strongly. Of course, we have all this early support for startups, incubation, acceleration that comes before. But this is more our aim to strengthen the European operators, I would say. When it comes to the potential demand side, the users, I think what we do in some cases is that we co-fund new use case demonstrations to help to introduce new users to these services. We also talk to potential customers from downstream to seek some strategic alignment on how we can align strategic roadmaps or our mission roadmaps. So we are also really reaching out to the non-space user community more and more. And when it comes to the investment community, we have an investor network now established in ESA, where we support investors in making the right decisions. Of course, we don't give investment advice, but we do talk to investors about companies and startups to discuss technical matters and our market understanding. And that really helps these investors, I think, to take the right decision. We also established partnership. There was just a partnership agreed with European Investment Bank and Investment Fund, where we work together on creating new investment tools to, in particular, enable the growth of the community. So these are the kind of things we're doing. I think we are looking in all directions.
Very nice. Okay, so sounds like ESA is pushing a lot, and there is some pull that you're looking for from the community. I would like to know a little bit more about, zooming out in the U.S. and like in the rest of the world. What kind of pull are we seeing in the investment community? Like what is coming out that is successful from
dual use, right? Everybody's running around figuring out what's their way in to have to capitalize on their attachments either in the defense infrastructure, which is expanding in every country, not just in budget size, which is true, but also in how the bureaucracy of defense spending, how procurement is actually happening. For example, in the United States, there's a lot of things where you think, oh, it's DOD. Well, actually, it's commerce. Or there's where the national security money is actually spent, or where the things are may not be in the department you think it is, and you're seeing the realignment of how countries are designing their space programs. The UK I know the most about, where I can't figure out from month to month who is responsible for what, because countries are realigning around their priorities. So back to, I think dual use is an opportunity for taking civilian architecture ultimately and capitalizing on the best of this fire hose of defense money and using it to get over the particularly expensive, risky hurdles. It is public financing, and it's just a question of how far into the defense side of national security space companies are willing to go.
Okay, I see. Let's go back to the EU and let's talk a little bit more about the Space Act. And I know that, it's not codified yet and it's not really in the EU Space Act, but I know there's been rumblings about insurance and all of the kind of things that go into commercial actors which are operating under a national umbrella right now. What happens when the EU is a single market, and how does that look for startups trying to launch something with huge amounts of risk and potential liability? This one's for Candice.
Unfortunately, my answer about the insurance will be not satisfying because, of course, in the proposal of EU Space Act, there's not a lot of things about it. So I think the situation will be barely the same before and after the enforcement of the proposal. That is to say, we will reach the national legislation with this fixed amount above which one the states will assume the cost of the liability. But the good thing for the companies with the EU Space Act is about the negotiation with the assurance and for the liability. That is to say, the basis of the negotiation will take into account the due resilience of the European Union and the standard of European Union, with especially the safety that will take into account into negotiation. So maybe the company will have lower cost in liability with assurance. It can be a good thing, but yes, for now it's just a proposal, and we have to wait for the legislator to make another regulation, for example, and for that maybe companies can have a dialogue with the legislator, the European legislator, to tell them what is the main problem for them, what is their thought, what they want, what they prospect to European Union. And finally, to jump what you said before, yes, all this obligation we spoke about before can lead to a higher cost for the company, especially for the small player. It's true, and the Commission knows that. But the company has to see the EU Space Act like an investment, because at the beginning it will cost, yes, but with time the company will develop themselves in all the European Union, and they will have more investment because we have the freedom of investment in the European Union. So they have to have the big picture of the EU space market.
I see, okay. So you heard it here first. Make sure you contact your legislator and ask for very low liability limits for your emerging space market. Okay, I think we have one more question slot available. So just let's go down the line and find out, in your field, what do you think is the biggest challenge that you see towards the economy of space resources actually lifting off and becoming successful in the next 5-10 years? Bernhard?
Yeah, I think there are quite a number of different challenges. Firstly, it's not just space resources, it's a whole value chain you need to put in place for space resources. Recently, we came about an issue that certain launches you cannot even insure. So when you talk about economy, you need to have a real insurance market, for example. That's just one of many examples. But I think, speaking more broadly, I'm not only working on space resources, but also commercial research on low Earth orbit and production in space, all these new ideas. I think what we really need is a success story, in my view. A company which really scales and makes business in space, either on the lunar value chain or producing new products in low Earth orbit. A company which really manages to scale, and we maybe see a first IPO. Because I think, in principle, we are advancing on all levels in the right directions. I think there's a lot of really first-class innovation happening. The pathway to ISIU is still a long way to go, because also we need to realize that the agencies first need to go back to the moon. There is a significant investment needed to bring humans and cargo to the moon, have mobility on the moon, survive the moon. This all has to come first before you think about how you optimize your operations by using local resources. So I think there is a tremendous public investment needed. In order, I think, to really, in my view, develop the space resource market, we need to have stable policy. We need to have sustained activities on the moon. We have seen in the last 20 years policy shifts every few years. I think what would be a clear signal is an international commitment to really go for building permanence on the moon. And that will be, I think, in my view, a major point to unlock also opportunities in the field of space resources.
Okay, so go to the moon. Got it. Candice?
My answer will be also about the space resources, but in the low way. One of the biggest challenges will be the equitable access to the space resources and especially to the moon resources. Why? Because in European Union, we'll try to make a fair and loyal competition between all the companies in European Union and the foreign company who want to go to the European market. But in the orbit and in the moon, it's not just European Union. We have a lot of big space states like the US and China, for example. And one of the biggest challenges for the European Union, it will be to stay competitive for the moon resources and in the orbit in this international scope.
I think it's a set of breakthrough events, successful demonstration of energy from space, space solar or nuclear on the moon. I also think it's a set of things like the SpaceX IPO. And I do think, I think the whole world is waiting for that IPO because not just the phenomena of itself, but the fact that the people who will make some of the most money from that will be highly skilled hardware, hard problem focused founders. And what I believe, I'm optimistic that what they will invest in, like you're seeing with Sagittarius, right? You're seeing folks go and do hardware problems with a clear-eyed sense of a European company and a US company. I think you'll see a lot more of that because the next big, fun, hard thing to work on is factories on the moon, is infrastructure in space, is manufacturing, in microgravity. It's the breakthrough in pharma. So I think there's a lot of money, and the billionaire tier is sitting it out, waiting to see, but coming into that new category of billionaire tiers are going to be very experienced, advanced engineers, and this is their thing. They don't just want to be investors, they want to build things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap it up a little bit here. So everyone, please thank our panelists one more time. And I'll let you all go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the panelists. And we have 2 more panel discussions before everybody goes home until next year. But please stay for the next 2 panels. The next one is chaired by Ernestina Binni from ESRIC, and it's going to discuss accelerating the commercial sector. Ernestina.
Hi, everyone. Almost to the end, but there is still a good number of people inside the room. So yes, accelerating the commercial sector. That's a question that we ask ourselves a lot, and we heard a lot right now during these days, and also just now, together with the enabler, right, of the commercial sector. So now we are passing from the ESA legal and economic part to speak with the people that are really working on the field. And they are facing the challenge. Which challenge? The one from the technology validation to the commercialization in itself and scaling up. And you know, when you are speaking with them, we are always asking, so what is blocking you? Where the doors are closed and so on? And they are always speaking about the ecosystem integration, flight readiness, and opportunity for partnership. And this is what we will discuss today with co-founders, with big company in the sector, and with the ESA vision. So I'm very glad to call to the stage Francesco Liucci from ESA, Innovation Manager for the BSGN Accelerator. Thomas Sinn, co-founder of D-Cubed. Thomas. Thank you. So we have with us Severin from Fibercot, system engineer. And finally, Christiane Bergeman, business developer manager in OHB. Thank you. Well, so nice to have all of you here with me. There are a lot of friends and new friends, right? Okay. So I think I will start with Thomas, my new friend, let's say. Apparently it's the first time at Space Resource Week. Oh my God, that's impossible. Obviously for someone in the space sector and doing in-space manufacturing.
I'm also shocked that it's my first time in Luxembourg and here at a conference.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I've spoken with you, you said to me that you are coming from ESA, actually, and you say it was another life, but did it happen? And then from ESA, you opened your own company, you started a journey, and you applied for the BSGN Accelerator, the Catapult one, if I'm not wrong, the in-space manufacturing. So can you say to us about your journey and what you did to arrive here?
Yeah, so I started at ESA first as a German trainee, then went to industry because I saw that's where I can really build things, but then also realized if I really want to change things, I need to start my own company. And 7 years ago, I saw that there's a component not available, and I thought this cannot be. So I started D-Cubed, and we did first just component release actuators, got a quite good business out of it. And then we realized, okay, the next bottleneck is power in space, and you need these mechanism to trigger it. And so we started building normal solar arrays, but we also needed more power in space. And that's where then in-space manufacturing came in. But in-space manufacturing, if you don't do it in space, it's not in-space manufacturing. And that's where we did the BSGN Accelerator and launched a mission into space that kickstarted all of the things that came afterwards.
Yeah, we will discover that later on. Severin, what about you? I would actually, Fibercot is a company in the terrestrial application that decided to jump in the space sector, and you are, let's say, the project manager of the accelerator, and we are working hard together. Now we know each other very well. So can you explain us this journey of Fibercot and how they come from the terrestrial to the space sector?
Yeah, sure. So Fibercot is a spin-out from RWTH Aachen, and it started with 3 founders. I'm not one of them.
They are very busy in US as well.
Exactly. They wanted to coat fibers with polymers for specialization of fibers. And yeah, then it was 2022, COVID came, and they weren't sure how to make money because it was still in research stage. And then someone from defense came to them and asked them, hey, you're coating fibers, can you also coat with aluminum instead of polymer? And the idea was a bit, two of the founders saw it a bit skeptical, but yeah, in the end they were then pivoting and decided to coat metal onto the fibers, and this immediately became a revenue stream for the company, which also enabled then continuing working on the polymer development. And another project that one of the founders had was moon fiber, that we also presented 2 days ago, where we are using the same spinning technology without the coating to create fibers from regolith as a full ESRIC technology. And it continued with FiberCode, which is how we got into ESRIC, where we met New Space Capital, our investor of Series B round. And yeah, so everything came together, the space, the moon fiber, and our terrestrial business, they are working together.
Yeah, in your case, there was a convergence, right, from between the two sectors, the terrestrial and the space sector. So, Christiane, you are coming from HB. You are in the big tree. And I should admit, you know, we met each other 3 years ago during Space Resource Week, where you had a panel, right? So 3 years after, still here, speaking about moon activity and exploration. Can you explain to us what OHB do, but actually where OHB started?
So when I saw this question, I found very funny, because when we talk about OHB, we think about the big OHB of today. But not everyone knows that OHB was a garage-like company with a bold vision. There was nothing there. When Manfred Fuchs decided to buy the Otto Hydraulic Bremen, a specialized company in hydraulics for ship and services for the German Navy, he just had this vision and his long-term strategy, nothing more. He recognized that the combination of institutional market positioning, momentum, and a niche approach could make his dream in a tangible capability. So the development was very ambitious, but very structured. Small steps, one after the other. We started to build the first satellite that calls Bremen Sat. That it was a very small satellite, cost efficient, but this was enough to give the needed visibility to open the institutional market, to increase the credibility, and to become today one of the 3 LSIs in Europe.
I should admit, I'm not coming to you, Thomas, but I should admit that this remembers me, you know, because we have a nice conversation. We had a few conversations together, and you are very motivated, right, as a founder, and you have spoken with me about vision and the market strategy. Sorry, Francesco, let me keep on that.
So regarding the vision that we have at Decubed, so here we are really wondering, okay, what is the next step that we can take? And this is really why we consume power as we do with the solar rays. Why not have power as a service? And that's where we really see the solar rays coming in, to making them bigger, to also do it via in-space manufacturing. And so we started as a component manufacturer, moved into subsystems, the solar rays, and now going into satellites and services, because with the customers that we have, we really see where the industry is going. And I'm also very happy to be here today, because why do we always need to bring everything up to space? Why can we not use the resources in space directly?
Yeah, thank you. Francesco, we have 2 companies from the accelerator that you know very well. And you know, you are very passionate for what they are doing, and you were probably the one that chose them, right? I should admit. Yes, the champions of tomorrow. So what do you think about them? Which one was the strategy behind the accelerator when you choose the company? How you see them evolving?
No, I have to say I'm very proud and happy to see this company evolving, maturing, going from a successful milestone to another. And what we're doing with the accelerator is really giving an incentive to do a demonstration. We're dealing with companies that at the stage in which they go into the accelerator, they are around TRL 4, 5. Some companies manage to move up that level, but this is the range where we usually operate, and the model is pretty straightforward. We provide up to 50% of the funding via ESA, and the rest, the company needs to be able to put on their own with private capital, as some of them have done successfully, raising funds from VC, or with their own in-kind resources, so paying for their employees and putting time and effort into doing this. And I think it's the time where the big question is how we can move to the next step. So how we can see this company to grow, how we can learn from the past stories like the one of OHB. And so the question for us, for the accelerator, and for the entire effort together with ESRIC as our partner in space resources is how we can help the scale-up phase. And I think there are quite a number of ways in which you can enable it. But the topic that I would like to explore today, also in the panel, is about the collaboration. So I think in general in space resources, we moved from being a very niche sector, and we still are, and where companies had to sort of fight for survival. And I think in the scale-up phase, we need to think more as an ecosystem. As was mentioned before by Bernhard, there is an entire value chain to be built, and there is not a single company that can do it alone. So I think that the point is to start to see from example like the mission of D-Cubed, how multiple companies in Europe can join forces and achieve more than what a single one can do, and trying to look at larger projects and how to match resources and match solutions together to achieve more.
Yes.
And if you mind, I just jump in here because you mentioned us. So we are doing now our next mission that will be launching next year in February, which will be like a 300-kilogram satellite where we also do power generation and power beaming. And here we realized, okay, we cannot do everything in-house by ourselves, so we decided to take partners in. We took more partners in that we needed, because we now need to evaluate who is the best partner or partners to continue. Because if we look over the pond, there are startups that are better funded with more government contracts than us. And here in Europe, we really need to take our strengths in the ecosystem, because we have the smart people here. We have the ideas here, but we need to do it together. But we should also not only focus on cooperation, doing everything together, because it also needs a little bit of a competition, because only with competition you can really have the best solution.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and this is really what we would like to discuss today. There was something that Christiane said to me, there was integration of the ecosystem. I really like this word. We speak about ecosystem, but how we, after we are doing the integration. And here we have two examples, one from Fibercot and one from New Thomas. Severin, would you like to speak about, because we've spoken, right, a lot, what you should do after, what the market is asking you, you said to me, yeah, sometimes we miss the space heritage and so on, so you are building something to answer to this question, right?
Yes, so at Fibercoat, as I said, we are coating with metals, and my team, we're the Fibercoat space team. We decided with simulations that coating bismuth would be a great idea for space radiation shielding. So we developed it, we created this idea into R&D project that has actually yielded fibers, and we wanted to talk to industry, but then you quickly realize that if you don't have space heritage, and you're a startup, they are not sure if you're at TRL 1 or TRL 6. It's all the same to them, and you don't really get further. It's a locked door. So for us, it was super important to go this next step, reach TRL 7. So, but it's of course expensive. There's some companies that offer these services, but they are, for us, unaffordable at this step. So in the end, we joined with Lofit, another startup from Spain, and together we built a tiny satellite. that will launch later this year to really reach that step. And the surprising thing there was, as soon as we talked to people and told them we already qualified and integrated our material and we will launch soon, it was as if we already had space heritage. So it's really a game changer. And if you're developing something for space, space heritage is the first big milestone that really changes how you get into commercial discussions.
Yes, nice say. Then I'm watching Thomas, and actually he's laughing because he has even something bigger that he's doing with the other company inside the accelerator. What's he called? Can I say power as a service, please?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I just want to follow up quickly on the last point regarding this flight heritage and how important it is to really put this thing in space, because in space we have the problem, if you don't have it in space yet, it will never be in space because nobody believes that it will actually work there. And we exactly had the same thing when we booked our IOD mission, first with the actuators and next one with BSGN, with the in-space manufacturing. Then customers kept on coming because they saw the companies putting money in, but also someone external like the European Space Agency is putting money in, so they are believing in the concept, and if they believe in, it cannot be so crazy. And now going to our next thing with the power as a service, to have a big or not so big power station in space and beam the power to low Earth orbit or to the moon's surface in the craters or surviving the lunar night. There we now have the same thing. We need the commitment, we would need the contracts, the belief from ESA, from companies that this is actually a value case. They should put money down because then we unlock the bottleneck that is the in-space assembly, in-space manufacturing, the lunar economy.
I have a lot of questions versus what you said, but now let me ask Francesco, what do you think about it? You know, there are two examples of how the company are building mainly themselves the mission, right? Investing their money. I just want to point it out, both of you are investing your money inside the mission, right? Thomas and Severin, it's your own money from another, let's say, market, right? Actuators? Yes.
Exactly, it's the money from our customers, investors' money. But then looking into the bigger thing, we always see that like anchor customer contracts that are for service that are longer in the future could be even more unlocking power to get more investment money into actually build the infrastructure to then deliver the service. Because you mentioned earlier that you're looking for ways to continue after the scale-up. That could be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the points, and this is one of the reasons I'm fascinated with this mission that you're gonna have, because for me it's an example of how even in a situation where you have competitors that they're testing together in the same mission, so possibly one of the most difficult situations of having collaboration among companies that may see each other as competitors. I think that is a very positive signal. This is what I would encourage the ecosystem to start to do. Trying to speak with other companies, to other peers, and trying to find matches. So this is what I'm good at, this is what are the capability and the vision that I have, but who are the other companies that are gonna come with me on this vision? Because if I do power, I will need logistics, mobility, I will need manufacturing, and in turn, the other positive element is that together they can more likely offer an end-to-end solution, and so be in turn more appealing for investor, for customers, and even for the agency along the line, in seeing that a system can be more mature, and so it's not the risk of testing only one technology that can fail, but testing a number of companies that can all be successful, because ultimately the vision for the lunar economy is that they need to benefit the greatest number of companies that they can be part of this ecosystem.
And what I also liked, I completely agree with you. What I also liked in two presentations before from MIT, where it was like, there's no, when there's no demand, there's no supply, but also there's no supply when there's no demand. So here we are taking also potential competitors in, because we are creating a new market that is not there right now. And only if we succeed together, then we can share this market together. That's why we are also not only focusing on Europe, but also taking the US in, especially on the bigger power market with Starcatcher, with All-of-You Energy, TerraSpark, because it's a market that does not exist now. We need to educate the industry, and we need to get there together, because if we all destroy each other, then there is nothing to share.
There is something that I really like in your mission, Power as a Service, that you put together operators that somehow they are competing between them. But with you, they are coming together, right? Because there is a lot of opportunity, let's say, in space and the moon market. There will be space for everyone, let's say, space, opportunities. OHB, you are searching for partnership actively right now, we know.
So before I start to that, I want to jump from what the colleague said. So I agree with everything. But in space, I think the things is more, the partnership concept is even more important. Because for me, the space activities and space missions and space projects are catalysts from perseverance, cooperation, and long-term thinking. And these are really the pillars that build a very robust and long-life cooperations. No company can succeed alone. No company can do everything alone. Even OHB, that has a very broad portfolio for expertise, we need partners to succeed. We need partners to work together. We talked about cooperation, ecosystem. That is exactly, we worked in space as an ecosystem. What Ernestina said, there is a space for everyone. We need to strengthen, we need to join forces, and we need to join forces, and these forces should be joined based on common goals and complementary strengths. Because just in this way, we can raise the awareness that we need to get there, to make something happen. Because there is also, we have also a compromise, not just with our companies, but also with the taxpayers, because they are giving us money to show something. And we can just show that if we go as a group. So based on that, we are talking about now the partners that OHB are looking. So OHB is always looking in partners, not just in exploration, but in other areas too. But here we are talking about exploration, about moon. So let's go to come to the moon port. So the moon port, it's a vision from OHB, and it's a vision based on, I can say, a lunar joint venture of visionaries. Let's go a little bit philosophic here, with purpose of commercialization. So we are looking companies that has interest to create an infrastructure on the moon and working together to make this succeed. And after that, of course, we are companies here. We are profit driven. So we are also trying to create a market, to earn some money, so that want to go to participate in that. And everyone that would like to be part of this community, please get in contact with us.
I feel a little bit bad to always jump in here, but yeah, I completely agree with you. But I also think there needs to be some competition, because that is really driving the innovation. And regarding that, we are all on it together. So even if you look at SpaceX, which seems like they are doing everything just of the purpose of doing it by themselves, they have programs like the rideshare program, where if they would be just for making money, they would not do the rideshare program because it's not a lot of profit for them. But they are actually creating the seeds for an ecosystem that will then need their service in the future, their launches in the future.
Of course, should be competition and should be diversity too, because if not, we are now driving shoe boxes. So if there is no innovation, if there is no different thinking, if all of us think the same, we will not achieve anything. We will stay where we are. So we need competition, we need innovation, and we need to work together.
Yeah, I think that we have quite a good number of ideas, and we have also quite a good number of support from startup, technology, and so on. So now we have the accelerator as well. I think in a few years that you are running the accelerator now, Francesco. And so you know what's happening, let's say, on the field, and what the company needs, also based on what they said, right? So how you would think about, the next step for the accelerator, for example, to support better the company or, to support them in their evolution?
Well, there are a number of things that we're working on to try to make the effort moving to a scale-up phase. One is to focus on a certain area. So up to this stage, we've been pretty open in supporting companies presenting solutions related to the entire value chain of space resources, and now we want to increasingly focus more on construction, which in itself is broad, but maybe it brings about that idea of having a more focused approach and maybe even some competition, because taking the element and the segment where a fiber coat is operating, for example, if we look at building infrastructure on the moon, it's unlikely that only one manufacturing technology or capability will be the winning one or the one that works for everything. It's likely to be few different technologies that will have a specific purpose and a specific advantage for one element of the infrastructure or another. And we want to be able to catalyze this and trying to focus more and search for the best capabilities in Europe to build these elements, this part of the value chain. The second thing that we want to do is to set up an advisory board made of potential buyers in the space sectors. So companies that can, from the private sector, that can be the buyers of ESRU-related solution. Today, they could be large lenders that they still have to interface with the agency and they get procurement from them, but they are perhaps interested in acquiring ESRU-related solution to add up to their offering, even to the agency. And we want to do so to start to align the solution definition to the needs of the market and start to energize a little bit more the private sector in that sense. And the third point is about the definition and the way in which we want to create the next call for the accelerator. So the idea that we are working on and trying to mature is that in the next phase, we would like to move to an idea where at the basis there is a project related to an infrastructure on the moon, so a lunar landing pad, for example, and to identify a first step and trying to select companies in specific buckets. So companies for energy, company for manufacturing capability, company for logistics, and trying to support each one of them, but also support them together. So to start to see how each technology can integrate with each other and try to achieve something that is of a greater scale and possibly leading to what we really want to do next, which is moving from the terrestrial demonstration to a lunar demonstration, which is really the next big thing.
Two observations, and maybe you can clarify also for the public. So it seems to me that you are speaking about consortium-based type of accelerator, okay. That is what you tried already to do in the past, but so with a more structured framework around, right? So to be clear, that is. And then, you know, a lot of people asked me after your intervention of the first day about what does mean construction? Are we really only focused in a niche? Can you explain better, you know, what's your intent for construction and maybe the enabling activity that we can do and that you are willing also to support us, for example, power somehow?
Well, there are two levels of maybe ways to characterize this. I mean, first of all, at least in the way that we're trying to structure and analyze the value chain, we see that there are capabilities that we can define as core, so that they're strongly related to the resources on the moon, and some others that are enabling capabilities, so energy or logistics or mobility. Per se, they are not specifically related to space resources, but without them, it won't be possible to do the actual excavation, handling, transportation of the material. And so this is the first level of analysis to bear in mind. And the second one, I mean, in construction, there are quite a few things because, again, looking at the concrete example, if we want to build an infrastructure on the moon, a base, a lunar landing pad, there are quite a few steps to go for. Site preparation, excavation, how do we take the regolith and turn it into a brick or doing sintering or whatever other solution is starting to emerge in the market. And all of these together make up the focus that we want to have. So it's not going to be so niche that there is only one type of company that fit the bill, but there are quite a range of companies that we want to try to attract and analyze and see which one is the best that we can support and move forward with it.
Thank you. Thomas, do you want to add something? I'm seeing that you are...
Yes. When I heard construction in space, we also said that we want to do in-space manufacturing, we want to do the in-space manufacturing company. But then the investors asked us, what is the problem that you're solving with in-space manufacturing? And that's got also clear to me is like we need an application case where the in-space manufacturing makes really sense. And for us, we are a VC-backed company with quite some customers already. Here, we need to solve a problem and give a solution. And here we saw, okay, in-space manufacturing is an enabling technology. It's not the solution. So we said, okay, we need more power and we need cheaper power. And why do we build everything here on the ground, make it foldable, that it just can survive the launch? Why not build it up there in space where we almost have no loads? And then we had, okay, we have the problem that we need affordable power. And the solution is we need to build cheaper. And then in-space manufacturing, in-space construction came in, solving this problem. And I think for a lunar base, it's quite straightforward. You need a lunar base, also you need to construct it. But I just want to say that we need the application for this technology. We should not just do the technology for the technology purpose.
Yes, you introduced a team that we approached already 2 days ago, that is the application-driven approach. That is very important, let's say, to move forward in the commercialization path.
Yeah, it also makes it comparable. That's when we then come to the competition again. It's like, why are you solving the problem better? Why is your solution superior to the other?
Yes, that sometimes this is also the topic of a challenge, right? When we do a challenge, we have a use case and, a comparable results somehow.
Exactly. And having a specific goal helps to build for that, and bringing together the value chain helps us. We are a fiber manufacturer. The people weave us, then they come into a composite, then they come into the application on Earth, and on the moon it will be the same for our fibers. And we get asked, what do we need to do with the regolith? How do we need to do beneficiation to best do your fibers? And then we say, well, that depends on what other people want to do with our fiber. So I think it's great if we get a clearer picture of what is expected from us, so we can now, while we have all the freedoms are also holding us back because it's overwhelming, it's too much. Having a narrow target helps us to more efficiently put our money to a faster deadline that's useful for then in the end the application that of course has to drive everything.
Yeah, and it's also a chicken and egg problem because you cannot have the solution if you don't know if it's even possible.
Yeah, we touched also the ConOps approach. Very nice, thank you. And I would like to add something here because with the experience that I have in the accelerator with the company in the Startup Support Project, I saw that, what you say is the market today at the moon exploration is giving to the company a lot of possibilities, and sometimes you are lost inside all this possibility that you can take it. So it's that's my suggestion. Somehow this is what I saw. That is very important to keep your value and be sure on what you would like to create independently, even if it's always good to see opportunities around, but you know, to have a guideline for your company, for your vision. Right, Thomas? You know,
Yeah, but so it's important to follow a vision, but it's also important to look what is around and to adapt. Because also us as we started a company with the vision to do power from space. And then we got our first investor. They said, that's too crazy in Germany and Europe. You have this small release actuator, bring this as a product to the market. So we adapted and said, okay, we'll do this first. We succeeded, and then we made a step to the next bigger thing. So yes, you need to follow your vision. You need to also listen to what is around, but then make up your own mind if the advice that you're getting is something that you also want to take. And at the end, it's your company. You want to go in this way, and you need to live with the consequences.
I think that here a vision from a business development will be quite nice to have.
I would say that there is no substitute for a good idea. Let's start like that. The challenging is how to introduce this good idea in the market and make this possible and create tangible capabilities with our idea. I think that the most challenging thing, we can thinking about good business plan, long-term visions, strategy, venture capital, but you can have everything and failed because your idea, it's not covering the demand. You didn't have a bigger picture or bigger view to say, okay, this is my idea, how I can take profit from that. And I think that is the most challenging for the startups companies. I believe, or I am quite sure, there is a lot of good ideas and there is a lot of revolutionary findings and so, but there is a lot of them also that not succeed because felt that. And I think that also the most important is not to say, okay, what I need to do to arrive there, it's important. I can say if I have, let's go give you an example. If I have a lot of IOD's possibility, I will increase my chances. But I think that the biggest problems that the startups have is the credibility. How I can make my company credible to the market. And this is the difficult, challenging, and this you can just do it if you fly something. If you fly something and you succeed. You need one success. It's not important for me, at least is my opinion, how big is your challenge. If you're going to do a satellite, a CubeSat, or a satellite for 1 ton, it's important that you succeed. It's from what matters is the science of trust and confidence and resilience. This is most important than to start to something very big and then you will never arrive where you want. So this is my opinion.
Yeah, in fact, I think that this is the key point. This is what Thomas and Severin with FiberCoat, they are doing. They are searching to succeed, as said by Severin, mainly they have the mission, and now it seems that they are already okay, right? As if their TRL is increased. Yeah. So we are 7 minutes to go. Do we have some question from the public? Otherwise, we are continuing with no, okay, seems not. Okay. Yes, one. We have one question over there.
Thank you very much. Omid for Earth to Mars. Would you please share what would be a challenging part in collaboration? Thank you.
Good, I understood that the question was for me. Challenging part in collaboration, I would see that the goals are misaligned and communication could be a real challenge. But this is with everything that we are working also together with other people. If we don't communicate well, also keep each other updated on changes and also being able to adapt together as a consortium. This is necessary because we are doing something that there is no blueprint, there is no plan. We are inventing something new, and with that we need our partners, our consortium, to follow and adapt.
I know that Christiane wants to add something.
No, I agree completely with Thomas. I think that if you don't have the same goals, you don't need to walk hand in hand. So you need to have same goals. I don't think that it's important how big is the expertise, but the motivation that is behind. Because it's important to have a team where you have very experienced people, but also young people, because these very experienced people are not going to live forever. So we need to pass here a little bit thinking about not just partnership, but also in project, because it's also a kind of partnership. You have a team, and all the team is engaged for the same goal. And if you don't have this aligned, then you have a challenging partnership. So you cannot succeed like that.
And what I would also add to this is every partner in this collaboration should have something to gain. They should get something out of it. Otherwise, they will not contribute their best.
Exactly, a win-win situation.
Francesco, would you like to add something about the challenge on the partnership? Because we tried a lot of time together to put company to, to create the community and to matchmaking and so on. What did you see?
I mean, from the agency perspective is different. We, in terms of how we can help the company to establish partners, I think the best we can do is to be always aware of what is happening in the market, to be plugged in with the reality of the market, and being able to, when working with the company, being able to be aware of what other companies are doing, and maybe to help making the connection. You miss this thing. Actually, I know that another company is doing such and such, and maybe you should speak with them. This is sometimes the best we can do beyond the actual support, the money, and so forth. And I think the Accelerator and ESRIC is doing a very good job in creating the ecosystem that he represented also in a conference like this. Well, maybe with the last words, I wanted to use a little bit of time for promotion, because in relation to space resources, I want to remind that we're going to have an important commercialization teamed conference on the 1st and 2nd of September in Copenhagen, and I invite all of you to come. But in relation to this one, we're having already open now an academic challenge, and one of the teams is space resources, and already with a construction focus. So to all university researchers out there, we're looking for new innovative ideas related to space resources, and in particular to construction applications, and I'm looking forward to receive application, and we're gonna select some, invite them to the conference, to a pitch competition, and the winning one will be supported by the accelerator run by ESRIC in order to move them to the next step in the commercialization journey. And finally, we have the Space Resource Challenge. So look up, because in the next 6 weeks it should come out, and that is also a very interesting way to engage with a very defined problem and to try to test the solution for this in a real environment. So watch out for this.
Thank you, well said, because this is actually our next appointment in Copenhagen, so well said. I just would like to make a summary. If you would like to say last word really about what is important for a company to scale up, maybe taking the partnership approach that we have discussed today. Just a last final word on that. Thomas.
Good. I will start. So my last words are just do it, just get started, don't overthink it. We should think less of the risks that are out there, more on the possibilities.
Okay, I can go next. I think it's really important to have the willingness to adapt as well. As we talked about the different goals that we might have, we are all coming from somewhere. We are space people, we are dreamers. We have our own vision, but in the end, if there's a customer need and there's a project partner who's willing to do their part, it's important to also adapt to then make it happen instead of it staying your perfect dream. It's better to do it and adapt it, and yeah, just as you said, just go with it.
So I would say be bold, control the risks, and find make good partnerships where the strengths are complementary and each one can, like a win-win situation that we talked before. That's for each partner.
Thank you. Before to give last word to Francesco, I think that we had a very interesting conversation. We started this panel because we saw that something should be done after the accelerator, because there are a lot of support tools as initiative from startup to accelerator, but then the company seems to have some difficulties for the topic that we approached. So space heritage, partners with the same vision, also partners that are on time, so means that they have the same schedule, right, Thomas? We saw that in the past with other company when we discussed it. So, yeah, good luck to you and to everyone. ESA and ESRIC are here for supporting you, and as much we can. Francesco, last.
As last words, I want to wish the best of luck for your own mission and for the new lunar initiative at OHB. And I'm really trusting that it's the right moment to be ambitious overall in the ecosystem and to really move to a scale-up phase. So my final words is to be aware of that the ecosystem is growing, is mature, and that there are opportunities around, and to try to make the best out of what is being built in these years.
Thank you. Please, thanks our panelists. And we are going to the last part of the conference. Thank you.